Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to GeoHorizon monthly lecture series. And today we have an expert keynote speaker, Professor Ankit Garg, with us to deliver his content on scientific writing. And before going to this the lecture, I would like to briefly say this has been organized under the banner of IGS, Indian Geotechnical Society, Indore chapter, and Professor Nilima Satyam, chairmanship, acting chairmanship for this chapter. And we have Professor Satish Sharma, co-chair, and Dr. Amit Sharma, honorary secretary. And hopefully that Professor Nilima Satyam, due to some her busy schedule, she could not join, I think. And Professor Satish Sharma is here. Sir, could you please deliver a few words about this initiative, if you're there here? Satish, sir? Hello? Satish, sir, you are here?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sir. You're
Professor
audible.
Ankit Garg, I've been hearing
Hello,
some of your lectures in the past.
Yeah, thank you, Professor.
So it's wonderful day for us that you are available today for making a presentation on a very important topic of academic writing. Many of our colleagues lack this art, and you have published so many papers. I understand more than 200 in journals. So you are the fittest person to speak on this topic. Welcome to this program. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. And I hope many of the audience who joined here, they remember on 7th October, Professor Ankit Garg has delivered one of his keynote, and it's the second one. And we are really privileged to host him here. Before we go into the topic, I would like to briefly introduce Professor Ankit Garg one more time for the audience benefit. So Dr. Ankit Garg is currently an associate professor at Department of Health and Environmental Science, School of Science, Jian Liverpool University, China. He obtained his PhD at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology in 2015. He is also former visiting scholar at University of Leeds, UK, University of Moscow, and former visiting faculty at ITMO University, Russia. He was a former assistant professor at IIT Guwahati during the period 2015 to 2017. And he was also associate professor at Shantau University during the year of 2017 to 2025, and a part-time World Bank consultant for monitoring transportation infrastructure projects in Assam during the year of 2016 to 2017. His research focuses on biogeotechnics and application of AI in geotechnical engineering. He has been awarded a prestigious Telford Premium Prize for 2020 from British Civil Engineers Association for publication in Geotechnic Letters, ICE UK. Also, his team was awarded the Best Research Paper Award published in the Central Asian Journal of Water Research by UNESCO Chair, holder of Water Management in Central Asia. He has published over 200 plus research papers in Scopus, and have the Scopus H index of about 35 and citations over 4,000 plus. His research group has been also mentioned by Spanish researchers, especially green infrastructure and water, and analysis for global research by Caporis Martinez et al. 2020. For his highest citations in Web of Science in research related to green infrastructure during the year of 2010 to 2019. He is also currently editor board member, associate editor in various reputed international journals such as Indian Geotechnical Journal, Journal of Smart Construction and Sustainable Cities, Journal of Materials Circular Economy, Journal of Octogeophysica, and Central Asian Journal of Sustainability and Climate Research. Besides, he was awarded Talented Youth Scientist Program, Young Doctor Award from Ministry of Education, Guangdong, and International Scientist Exchange Program. He is also awarded Outstanding Young Alumni Achieve Award from the Alma Institute. So he has been invited to deliver lectures at various universities across the globe, such as UK, Japan, India, Malaysia, Russia, Germany, Kazakhstan, and Thailand, and many more. So with this, I would like to welcome Professor Ankit Garg for delivering this lecture and agreeing on a short notice. And despite of your busy schedule, we really privileged to host you here. So now I request you to take a 40 to 45 minutes and then deliver on scientific writing. And thank you so much, Professor Ankit Garg, and over to you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ramo, and also thank you, Professor Satish Sharma. I will also like to thank Professor Nilima Satyam, although maybe she has a busy schedule, but
Professor Ankit, sorry to disturb. I think Professor Nilima Satyam has joined, chairperson of
okay.
ITS Indore chapter. Madam, could you please give her 2 words? Could you speak 2 words, ma'am? You are there? I think madam is not able to.
Okay, no problem. No problem.
Give me a second. I will try to unmute madam. I think some unmute issue is. Yeah. Madam is
Yeah,
here.
actually, I don't had a permission to get unmute. Actually,
Okay.
I could not join from my laptop. Hi, Ankit. Happy to host you again. Thank you so
Okay.
much. And I just want to tell to all the participants, I see that there are already 46 people, so which is a very good number at this hour, 12:30 on the working day on Monday. So that itself shows that how interesting the topic will be. And Ankit, actually, we have been talking, and I just told him to do this talk because sometime before COVID, when he visited IT Indore, he took this just a session, half day session, because I requested him to our PhD students at IT Indore. And let me tell you, all the students who attended that session really got benefited, and they still remember, like, the kind of details he explained, especially for all the PhD students who are, writing their papers. This is going to be very useful session. We are going to record this session and will be put up in our YouTube channel as well, so that, many people will get benefited. So thanks again, Ankit. Happy to hear you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful words. Professor Ankit Garg, over to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Ramu. I mean, I tried to make this lecture. I'm not sure if it's 40 minutes. It can be little longer because, as ma'am
No
mentioned there,
problem.
I think,
No.
because there are some details I think that are very important in each section when we write manuscript. So, I mean, without wasting time, I think, start the lecture. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, just to give you idea, I think I work in this university now as an associate professor. We call it Xi'an Jiatong Liverpool University. You can also call it as a short name, XJTLU. I mean, that's the name of university. It's located in Suzhou city. I mean, I give you an idea because in India, I think we are aware of Shanghai, Hong Kong, and also Beijing. But Suzhou is it's also an international city, very close to Shanghai, almost 1 or 2 hours by drive. And Hangzhou is also very close to Suzhou, around 2 hours by drive. So you can call this region Suzhou, Shanghai, Hangzhou. It's very similar to, we can say in India, we say NCR region, New Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida. It's a very highly industrialized area. So Shanghai, I think, is quite, well known. It's known for its Tesla manufacturing and also Volkswagen. Hangzhou is quite popular for its internet companies. Recently, I think you might have heard about DeepSeek. The headquarters of DeepSeek is in Hangzhou. And Suzhou is known for its companies mainly from Germany. So there are more than 500 companies from Germany which have invested and is doing manufacturing in Suzhou. So our university is located in Suzhou, but we get a lot of influence, or you can say, from Shanghai and Hangzhou as well, because we are located very near. Yeah. So just to give you an idea of university, it's a joint venture of China and UK government, which led to this foundation of new university in 2006. So this is a partnership between 2 universities, one from China and another from University of Liverpool, UK. And because of that, our majority of our degrees, whether it's postgraduate or undergraduate, it comes from Liverpool University. For undergraduate degree, it also get another degree from Ministry of Education in China. But for both undergrad and postgrad, students do get degree from Liverpool University, because the standards of education and everything is as per University of Liverpool. So it's a quite international environment with over many international students also, not only students, but also faculty members. So we'll give you an idea because I work in a school of science. We have our dean, Professor John Mathers, then our head of Department of Health and Environment Science, Professor Eben, and then we have Department of Chemistry and Department of Bioscience. So in this university, we also have, we call it School of Design, under which we have Department of Civil Engineering and also Department of Architecture and other discipline. Okay. So this is the idea of faculty members in School of Science. You can see we have faculty members from different countries, including France, Greece, India, Italy, Iran, Malaysia, Russia, UK, and so they are around, I think most of the faculty members, 7 or 8 comes from UK and USA. This is only in the School of Science. So if you look at School of Design or other school, business school, we again have, you can say, a lot of diversity in international faculty members. Yeah. So that's an advantage I think students get here because of the diversity in faculties. They get to understand not only from technical, but also from cultural aspect. And we have various programs, including civil engineering programs also. But since I work in School of Science, just to give you an idea, I mean, I think the closest related programs will be environmental science and also in material science and engineering. So here the programs are very multidisciplinary. So even though you have some idea which is related to engineering, you are welcome to apply also in the School of Science. Yeah. And in terms of research output, I mean, we have research output which is constantly increasing with time. Yeah. And also we have collaborations. As I said, our location is located, I mean, the university location is actually in the, we call it Suzhou Industrial Park. It's located well within the industrialized hub of Suzhou, Shanghai, and Hangzhou, 3 cities. So that's why we have collaborations not only with universities, but also with industries. And just to give you an idea, because this talk is in IT and also from India. So we also have a PhD student from India working in School of Science. So this is a very recent story from a student called Agni. She is working in School of Science. So she's also working on a very interesting project on understanding the biodiversity in different regions in China. And past to past, I mean, at least in my research group, I have invited several students from India. I think last year, Professor Nilima's student, Mr. Akash, he came to visit China in 2024, and he's still working with Professor Nilima, and we are jointly co-guiding. So we time to time invite students from IITs or other universities if they have interest to do some internship or short-term research. Yeah. And in Suzhou, if you're welcome, you can also have a good taste of food. There are a number of Indian restaurants in Suzhou. This is only in Suzhou city. Since Suzhou is very close to Shanghai, you can also explore numerous Indian restaurants and cuisines in Shanghai also. So, and also there's a celebration of Holi in Shanghai. So if you are in Suzhou, I mean, you will not miss your home too much. You will have a lot of, as I said, diversity in terms of food, and also you can have Indian food as well. So coming to the main part, this was all about university and city. So today I will discuss one by one some tips related to abstract, introduction, material methods, results, and conclusion. So these are, I think, 5 major sections in any publication when we write any manuscript. And then I will also give you some idea what things need to be, we need to keep in mind when we draw figures for experimental setup and also field monitoring. So in any journal, I think if we look at it, the first page is usually we have a title page with author affiliation, right? Then we have an abstract, then we have a keywords, introduction, material methods, result discussion, and conclusion. So I will cover all these 7 major aspects. Others are not the most important ones, but still we need to pay attention to acknowledgement references, which are very important as per journal standards. So coming to the abstract part. So an abstract usually, I think if if you are an research student already, like in master or PhD, you might be knowing that different journals have different criteria of the number of words in an abstract. Usually 200 to 300 words are normally required for any abstract. So the idea of an abstract, why it is placed in the front of the manuscript, is because it gives you the summary of your entire research work. So if you have presented a certain research work in your manuscript, an abstract gives you a very short summary, very important summary, I would say. So abstract is very important because when you submit a manuscript, most of the time the editor or the editorial board, they will look into your title of your manuscript and abstract. Because to be honest, many of the editors, or I mean, even the reviewers, they don't have time these days to look details into your manuscript before they decide even to review your paper. So an abstract becomes very important. Okay. So in an abstract, we usually discuss about overall purpose of the study. Okay. So what's the overall purpose? What you investigate, and major findings. Now, the important points which we need to cover in an abstract from a publication point of view, there are two things very important. So one is, I would call it, we say, okay, I'm not able to write here, but okay, one is we call it novelty. Okay, so novel. Okay, how much, what is new in your research? That is very important. And the second is rigor. Rigor means how much efforts you can say in terms of methodology, or not only efforts, but also scientific approach you have adapted in terms of, we call it rigor. So novelty and rigor, there are two important aspects of any research article. So when we write an abstract, okay. So when we write an abstract, we need to be careful about two aspects. One is novelty and one is rigor. Okay. So usually we write abstract in the beginning of manuscript, right? I mean, when we submit our manuscript, abstract is placed in the beginning. But my own suggestion or thinking is that we should try to write an abstract after we have completed other parts of our manuscript. Although we should place it in the beginning of an abstract of the paper, but we should try to write it in the end, because abstract contains the most important information in your paper. Okay, important means it should have new information and also rigor. Rigor means your scientific approach. Two things must reflect in your work. Okay, so usually you can say that abstract, it's very easy to write. Yes, it's easy to write, but when we have to write a good abstract, it's not easy, because then we need to decide what things we can include and what things we should not include. So when we try to decide what to include and not include, or we try to prioritize, at that stage, we need to decide based on novelty and rigor. So what is new? And also in terms of rigor, these two factors we need to consider what we need to include in our abstract. Okay, suppose if you have developed a new method, okay, then in your abstract, you should try to give more weightage to methodology. Okay, discussing about your new method, its validation, and also its limitation. But if your results are new, then you should give more weightage to your results. Okay, so that depends totally on your selling points. Okay, in your research. So usually, abstract is like a short version of your paper. I would say it's like one paragraph of your entire paper. So we can also call it like a trailer of a movie. Okay, it's not very similar, but we can say that it's a trailer of a movie. So before we watch movie, I think for young students, they may know that we like to see the trailer, right? If the trailer of the movie is very interesting, we will we will go for the movie, right? We will say, we may say that, yeah, movie may be interesting. So abstract is like a trailer. So it means our abstract should contain very important information, and the most important ones which we want to highlight to readers and also to reviewers. Okay. So usually abstract, when I say it's a short version of paper, it contains of 4 major parts again: your background, objectives, okay, then material methods and results conclusion. So, I mean, I have written it in a more simplified way so that for young students, specifically who are in master's or undergraduate, or even in their early, year 1 or year 2 of their doctorate degree, they can get a basic understanding first. So we can divide abstract into 4 major parts. We can call it background, objective, material methods, and results and conclusion. So when we talk about background, okay, you need to think about your research problem, which you are targeting. What is the significance of your problem? So here we mostly discuss about the application part of the research problem. In case, if you have a summary of previous studies, you can mention, and then limitation of the study. Now, this part is important specifically if you're working on some idea which is not completely new. It's very important because editor these days, before they send paper to review, they will like to see exactly, although your idea may look very similar, or maybe the topic overall may look similar to previous topic, but they will like to see exactly what is missing in the previous study and what you have targeted. Okay, so this is very important, the limitation part here. You must mention what is the limitation in the previous study. Okay. Then comes objective. Now, this is also one point where I have seen when students make a manuscript or an abstract, they tend to make a mistake. They sometimes forget to write an objective. So objective should be written very clearly in your abstract. What is the main objective of your study? And try to list not more than 2 or 3 objectives. At least I have seen in the reports, not in the papers, but in the reports that students tend to mention many objectives. Now, this is when you mention too many objectives, either these objectives are overlapping each other, or you are not clear about your objective of study. So this is very important. You should be very clear what is your objective. And also remember that objectives are not equal to method or task or test. Okay, I have seen students writing the objective of this study is to conduct compressive strength test. Okay, so this is scientifically wrong. Our objective of our study is never to conduct an experiment. Okay, our objective is to carry out or to reveal some mechanism. It's not about doing test. Doing test is task or method. Okay, in fact, it's not even method, it's just a task, doing test. But or conducting field monitoring, it's a method, okay, or a task. It's not an objective. So please, in objective, try not to mention about testing. Okay, testing is not equal to objective. Objective has to be, like you say, I want to explore a fundamental mechanism between soil and plants or biochar, or I want to develop a new approach or a new method. That's called objective. Okay. So I will discuss in detail also this point. Then material methods. Now, you need to list out at least basic what kind of soil, if you're working in geotechnical engineering, what kind of soil you have used, or if you have multiple materials, like you have some amendments like fly ash, biochar, or vegetation, you need to mention it. Then at least give an idea if you have used laboratory method or field method, okay, or numerical or theoretical. Now, this point I want to stress here. Suppose in your research, you have used multiple methodologies. You have used field and you also used theoretical, or you have used lab and you also use theoretical. Then it is very important you mention both. Okay, it's a plus point. Okay, it's a bonus if you mention both and clearly that in this study we have adapted both laboratory and theoretical method, because it gives an idea to editor or a reviewer that you are very rigorous in your research, that you have used at least two methods. Yeah. So my suggestion is, in case you have used more than one method, 2 or 3, it's better to mention it very explicitly in the abstract. And then test program, you need to mention at least very basic, like you have done 5 tests, 10 tests, or 20 tests. Now, for some students, they might have done 50 tests or 60 tests. Then I suggest you should mention it, because it shows rigor, okay, that your efforts. Okay, it's a see at one point we need to be scientific, but at the same time we have to be very little clever in a way that we also need to highlight our selling points. If you have done more hard work, you have done more tests, you have used more than one method in your research, then you should highlight it. You should not miss it, because abstract, as I said, have become very important these days, which actually it's used by editor to decide whether they will review your paper or not. Okay, so don't think that editor will read your entire paper before they decide to reject or accept or even to review. So they will focus on abstract first. Okay, so that's why I'm spending more time on abstract. So please remember, there are 2 points for when you're writing an abstract or any parts of the paper. One is novelty, second is rigor. Rigorous means how much efforts you have put, or how strong is your scientific approach. So if these 2 points, with these 2 points in your mind, you should write your abstract or any other parts of paper. Okay. And the last point is key results and conclusion. You focus on main result. Now, these are the 4 major parts of an abstract. Okay. Now, I will give you a very small example, a very simple example, I would say. I use it for undergraduate students usually, but I just use it to make them clear that how in an abstract we divide into 4 different parts, major parts. Okay, the first one is your background or research problem. Like I said, strength of soil is very important for design of engineering infrastructure, previous study. So this is the limitation, although it's not the best way to write limitation, but for an undergraduate student, I use this as an example because it's very simple for them to understand. Okay, so this is more about limitation, and then comes objective. Okay, the main objective of the study is. Then comes material methods. Okay, you mentioned about soil type. Then you mention about the strength test apparatus. Then you mention about samples. Okay. Then you mention about what standard you use to carry out that. So in India, we used Indian standard. We can use American standard or British standard, or here we normally use Chinese standard to do the test. So I think testing standards, we have different standards in different countries, right? So this is about material methods. And the last one is results and conclusion. Okay. So this is a very simplified way of dividing an abstract into 4 parts. Now, when you look at abstract of other published papers, you can also think about dividing that abstract into 4 different parts normally. And now think about your own work. If you think you have developed a new method, then you should mention more lines here in material methods. If you think your results are new, then you should add more points in your results and conclusion. If you think your objective is relatively new, then you should try to emphasize by one more line your objective very carefully. So think about your own work. What is your selling point? And according to that, you can add, more lines or increase a certain section in abstract. Like if your method is new, add more lines in material methods. If your results are new, describe your results more. Okay, so that depends on what's your main focus. Okay, what's the selling point of your study? So this is a similar, you can say, in any abstract. If you've seen in a research article, you can divide it into 4 major parts. Okay, normally. So for students who are attending this lecture, they can think from their own research, or if they read other papers, they can try to do the same exercise to understand. Now, in many research, actually, you will see some articles where even the objective is missing. It's not clear. Okay, I'll give you some idea later. So the first point in an abstract is we call it background. So we need to mention what's the application of your problem, importance of your research findings, and what's the scope of your work. Okay. For example, if you're focusing on compressive strength of soil, you can say, or shear strength of soil, how the strength of soil is important, and how previous studies have not considered it in their research. Okay, this is limitation. Yeah. So I'm not giving the very difficult example. You choosing a very simplified, very simple way of writing so that students who are in undergrad or master, they can understand. Uh, and the second point is objective. Now, here I will stress more. The main objective of this study is to investigate strength, or you can say is to investigate strength mechanism of soil at different moisture content. Try not to mention more than 2 or 3 objectives, definitely. If one objective, if it's very clear, it's good enough. You don't need to mention more than one objective. So understanding the main objective of study is very important. Now, this is actually where I will say you need to sometime as a student, if you're very young, try to discuss with your supervisor and also try to understand yourself. What is the main research objective of your study? It's important because when you spend 1 or 2 years of your PhD degree, sometimes you do maybe 10 tests or 20 number of tests, and during this time you actually forget yourself sometimes that what was the main objective of your study, that why you were doing all these tests. So you need to ask yourself every time, what's the main objective when you write your paper? Very important, because that objective has to be kept in the mind when you're writing even methods, even results, and even conclusion. Okay, it shouldn't be like your objective is something else, your conclusion is coming something else. Okay, it happens because it can happen. Okay, and experiments or computer simulations are not equal to objective. Now, this is another important point, I would say. Many a times I have seen students writing that objective of this study is to conduct the test. Now, doing the test, as I said, is not your objective, it's a task. And even to conduct field testing or monitoring is not an objective, is your task. Okay. So objective has to be from a research point of view. What is objective? These tests, what we do, compressive strength test, field testing, and monitoring, they are just methods to achieve our objective. They are not objective themselves. Okay, so this is very common mistake I have seen in many articles. Okay, we can say that our objective is to identify correlation. This can be a very simple objective, a simplified way. So aims, you can see these keywords: objective, investigate. Now, when we say investigate, it means something in depth. Okay, you're going to find it out, something which is very much in depth. You can also use the word explore. Okay, explore means which is not in depth. Okay, which is also you can use the word explore. Let me see if I can write. So you can use the word explore. Okay. Okay, I think my pad is not working, but okay. So you can also use the word explore, okay, which is more milder as compared to investigate. If you think that your research is not in the depth, like you have some missing points in it. And in material method section, okay, in a simplified way, you need to mention about your materials which you have used. Then when it comes to research method, now this is very important. As I said before, if you have used more than one method, you should try to highlight both of them. And you should make it clear that your approach is very rigorous and scientific. This is very important where I think the reviewer are paying attention to. And test program. If you have done many tests like 50, 60, and you have also considered replicates, to do statistical analysis or to understand the statistical variability, then it's even better to highlight it, okay? Because reviewers are looking for two things: novelty, what is new; second is rigor, means how strong your scientific approach is and how much efforts you have put. Okay, these two things they are looking for. And procedure, now again think from procedure. If your procedure of your testing is not new or is very standard, no need to mention it if it's well known. If your procedure is very new and it's something you want to sell, like you want to highlight it, you mention it. Otherwise, don't need to mention. Okay. So when you write an abstract, you may first time when you write, it may have 500 words or more. Then you need to reduce it. When you reduce your abstract, you need to consider two main points: novelty and rigor. So considering these two things, you can reduce your abstract size from 500 words to around 200 or 250 words. Yeah. I mean, these are just example of testing standards. So key results, again, you try to mention one or two important results. Now, when you mention these results, think about, for a while, you also think about whether these results are new or not new. Suppose if somebody don't do that research which you have done, can somebody get the same result or not? You need to think carefully. If your results can be, estimated or understand without even doing research, then it means your results are either not written well or they are not new. So again, pay attention to the results. Okay. Usually it's better to add explanation along with the results. Okay, this explanation can be a mechanism which you have tried to understand behind the result. This is better. So that will increase your importance of your result. Okay, so you can add explanation along with the result. That will help to make your result more strong and more new. Otherwise, I mean, just for a while, you need to also think carefully. Suppose you have 5 results. You don't want to mention all 5, right? You can mention 1 or 2. But if you can add explanation behind it, which is relatively new itself, then it will be more, I mean, your results may look more of more value, I would say, to the reviewers or readers or editor. Okay. Now, results should not be too general. Okay. Results should be coherent with objective. So think about your objective also and result together. If your objective is saying something else, your results are of something else, it means your objective is not coherent with results. You need to revise it. Okay. So I'm saying this because when we finish our paper, it can happen that, you decide to write it an objective, but your results are saying something else. Okay. So you need to check it carefully again. Okay. So this was all about abstract. So I hope, so this was very important because in abstract contains the logic of entire paper, because we divide abstract into 4 parts: research problem, objective, methods, and conclusion. Now, in journals, you don't need to divide it, right? We write it as 1 paragraph. But to explain you all, even I used to teach this course before. I used to divide this abstract into 4 parts so that for students, it's easy to understand how to write an abstract. Okay. Now, coming to introduction. Before introduction, just to give you idea about the title of your manuscript. So title of your manuscript again should be very crisp and clear. Selling points of your work. This is very important. Okay. I mean, think about the name of movie should not look very same, right, to the previous movie. Similarly, title of manuscript also matters. Okay, not more than scientific terminology and not too general. Now, when we talk about introduction, we need to ask why introduction exists in a paper, in any publication. In introduction is basically why it's come in the beginning also after abstract, because introduction set a tone, or I would say it gives a justification, or I would say convincing argument to any person who is reading your research, why your research is important. Okay, what is your research, why it is important, why it was not done before, okay, and how it's useful. Okay, so there are many questions behind your research. Okay, how did you come up with this idea that you want to do this research? This is the main question which introduction answer. Okay, how do you come up with this idea that you want to do this? Okay, so there's a logic behind it, right? Or I would say justification of doing research. This justification is written in introduction. Okay, so you can consider introduction like a story in itself. Okay, introduction is like a story in itself. What is the significance of your study? What research has been already done, which is literature review? What has not been done? It's very important. Then hypothesis and motivation is linked to this one, what has not been done. And then comes objective. Okay. And it's important to claim novelty using intro. Now, when you try to justify your research, it means you try to highlight what has been done, right? So if you can highlight what has been done and what has not been done very clearly, it means you are highlighting novelty. That is something new you are going to do, right? But if you are not able to highlight these 2 points clearly, especially this and this, okay? Now, point number 2 and 3, what has been done, what has not been done. If you have not been highlighted it clearly, then it means your novelty part is not clear. Okay? So hence your, I would say, more than 60-70% of your novelty in your research lies within introduction, and also abstract, of course, but lies within introduction. So if reviewer reads your introduction and find it out that although your research is new, okay, although your research is new, but your introduction is not written well, okay, it means you have not justified it properly why you want to do this research. Then it means your paper will be rejected most likely. Okay. The reviewer will comment that the research is not justified clearly, the introduction is not written well, the literature review was not done properly, the limitations were not highlighted, hence your researches cannot be accepted in current form. So they will write something like this. So as I said, novelty is one important. So introduction is very important for novelty. Okay. Now, introduction you can also divide into 6 parts. Okay. Usually for students, I always do this. I would always try to divide introduction into 6 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, before you write, now introduction is not easy to write, I will tell you. Okay. Many a times when we write introduction, we tend to get, I would say lost, or we are writing literature review, which is not even relevant to your current paper. Okay. So you can get lost when you're writing your introduction sometimes. My suggestion is you should write introduction after you complete your material methods, then results. Then you write introduction, because you will then more understand more clearly you will understand what you have done in your research, what you have got as a result, and what is important, especially from literature review point of view. Maybe you have read 100 articles. Doesn't mean you need to include all 100 articles in your review. That has to be very relevant to your current research. So you can divide introduction into 6 parts, and I suggest you work backwards. So you can make a flow chart in a white paper. Okay, just take an A4 paper, write a flow chart. So create a flow chart in your paper and start writing from objective. Just start brainstorming using an A4 paper sheet. Okay, make a flow chart on a A4 paper by pen, and try to brainstorm what you want to write in objective, just key points, then what you want to write in motivation, but what you want to write in hypothesis and limitations. And then you try to decide based on your objectives and limitation, what literature review is relevant to your research. Remember, this is very important. It's not easy to highlight this. Okay, and the most important point in introduction is the connectivity between different sections. And this is sometimes missing in many introductions. So, in literature review itself, you may have 3 or 4 paragraphs of literature review, but the connectivity is missing in it. Okay. In your thesis or report, you sometimes can highlight, okay, these people have done this, these people have done this, one by one. But in journal publication, usually we don't use this kind of approach. We write in form of a story. I would say story, 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 our literature review, because we want to give a summary of different studies, what has been done and what has not been done. So we cannot say that every time that this individual do this, then individual do this, then there is no connectivity between different researchers, right? Research. So connectivity is very important in introduction. So my suggestion is when you want to write introduction, don't start writing on manuscript directly. You try to brainstorm using an A4 paper, A4 sheet. Okay, and draw a flow chart and make a flow chart of your introduction from objective, motivation, hypothesis. So work from bottom to up like this. Then you will be able to more clearly understand what you need to write in literature review. If you want to write from the top to bottom, like from significance to literature review, when you start writing in this way, your significance can be very general. Then your literature review again can be very vast. You may have 100 papers you can insert, but you don't need to do that. You have to be very relevant, very specific to your own research that you are doing. So that's why my suggestion is, which I practice. I mean, you can do it in different way if you like, but according to my suggestion, I do in this way, that I write objective and then I will work from bottom to top. So this is very important part of introduction. It's not easy to write. Okay. And when you write introduction, you need to keep in the mind which journal you are submitting. Now, these days we are working in multidisciplinary areas. We also sometimes include fly ash or other waste materials in geotechnical engineering. So if you need to also check the journal you are submitting. So according to that, sometimes your literature review and significance may change a little bit according to, in order to meet the requirements of that journal. Okay. So that part you may also need to keep in mind. But the basic part is that we need to work from bottom to top. Okay. So objective become very important, and based on your objective, your entire introduction is defined. Okay. So don't start writing in the manuscript directly. Brainstorm it. Use a A4 paper, empty paper. Make a flow chart. Do this kind of simple exercise. You will understand more. Okay. And this is just to showcase. We have. I mean, in my own paper, which we have published before. So this is the first section, which is significance. Then we have literature review. Okay. So when you read any paper, okay, in future, I would suggest when you read any paper in future, please, you can try to see these points in introduction. You can try to highlight this yourself, and it will give you more clear idea how that particular group of authors have written introduction. And actually, this is very good exercise, which can also help you to understand behind the lines, what is the thinking of these authors. This is very important. Now, when you try to divide their introduction into 6 parts, you will also be able to understand their way of writing. When you understand their way of writing, you can understand their way of thinking. And if you can understand their way of thinking, it means you can catch what is missing, really missing in the research. Okay, what is critical. This is very important for critical review of any paper. So try to use this also an exercise, because when I teach this course, I give this an assignment for students. They have to pick one paper and they have to divide introduction into 6 parts. They have to try to divide, and they have to highlight their own opinion in the published paper, whether that introduction follow this standard or not, this 6 parts or not. If they have more parts, they can highlight, or if there's missing something, they can highlight. Okay. Now this is very important. As I said, you can understand the way of writing of different researchers. If you understand, you can understand their way of thinking also. Okay. Because it's not about writing. Ultimately, it's about thinking. Right. And this is, I mean, I'm not, because of time constraint, I'm not going one by one, but you can also read in general when we talk about significance. You can see this is highlighted significance in embankment stabilization about fibers. This is about literature review. Okay. Then this is about limitation. Okay. No such studies exist on this. Then this is about hypothesis and motivation. Okay. Just between. Okay. Okay, just wait. I pressed the wrong button. Okay, can you see the screen? Right. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So, when we talk about limitations, so after literature review, I mean, or during the literature review in between, you must mention limitations, like what has not been done. Okay. And then based on that limitation, you need to mention hypothesis. So if somebody have not done it, it doesn't mean you have to do it. Then you need to give your hypothesis why that thing is important. Okay, suppose if somebody has not done this study on compacted soil fiber composite, then how this thing is important, you need to mention, or you need to give hypothesis that if we do this, this is beneficial for, fundamental understanding of water balance, or you need to give the reason why we have to do this. Okay, so that is very important, hypothesis and motivation. After that, so limitation, hypothesis, and motivation, it's important points in an abstract, which comes after your literature review. Okay, so you can see here in the motivation part, we can write motivation from 2 aspects. One is, you can say, suppose if you're working in geo-environmental engineering, you have geotechnical engineering, you have also environmental part. You can have motivation from engineering point of view. You can also have motivation from environment point of view in the same in the same point. Okay, so you need to think, okay, if you're using waste material or waste fibers, you can add that these fibers are, coming from agriculture waste, and it also helps to reduce the burden of waste management, and also provide an additional revenue, or alternative for creating small scale industries like that. So this is coming from environment economic aspect at the same time. And from engineering aspect, you can say that these fibers are can provide additional resistance, or strength to the soil. So you need to think from all different aspects, especially when you're submitting your work to a multidisciplinary journal. Okay, they may like to see not only from geotechnical engineering point of view, but also from environment. So which journal you are targeting also matters to some extent. especially when you write your literature review or your motivation and hypothesis. It can matter. And then comes objective. Now, objective is very clear here. The current study investigate this in very clear. Now, this point, this part, you might have seen in some papers after objective, they will write additional sentences to highlight what they have done. Like a series of tests were conducted, effect of this was analyzed. If you read this, it's optional. It's not like you must do it. You can put this part in the after objective here in introduction, or you can move this to material and methods in the beginning. Now this is done because your introduction sometimes is very long. And if the reviewer is reading your paper, he or she may get deviated from exactly what you have done. So for the reviewer and also for the reader, to give them an idea that what you have done in your work, you can give a summary of your method of your paper here also. It's kind of summary of your method. So before you start your material method section, you can give a small summary like this. It's optional. It's not like you have to do it, but it's good way. It's a good way because you give additional information to reviewer or readers about your work that you are going to describe in future sections, right? So next comes material methods. So we use methods to achieve objectives, right? So, and also this methodology helps to understand the results carefully. So method is like a bridge between your objective and your results. Yeah, right. And also we need to understand the accuracy in our results. We have to be rigorous, as I said. This word. So if introduction is about novelty mostly, methodology is about rigorous. So this point is very important. So there are 2 points we usually consider for manuscript: novelty and rigorous. Now, in our civil engineering, usually, or in environment, we have 3 different types of methodology. Okay, so one is field testing, okay, which I think in geotechnical engineering we also do. One is laboratory testing, which is I think mostly we are involved. We usually do this in our geotechnical engineering, and also many undergrad students, you might have done this, right? And then see theoretical modeling, you can think about developing new models, equations, or I would say numerical modeling when you try to solve any existing equation using existing program, okay? I mean, I think, give you a simple example, there are commercial programs like GeoSlope, Abacus, Plexus, you might have used this. Now, there is a linkage between three methods. Okay, we need to understand none of these methods are perfect. Okay, laboratory method testing, we usually use at a small scale where we can control some of the boundary conditions and material. Field testing and monitoring is usually we consider more closer to reality, but very difficult to understand because of a lot of fluctuations, due to climate, stress, non-uniformity in the material, and also your boundary conditions are not constant. So field testing, monitoring is although more close to reality, but it's difficult. So that's why we have to go through the lab, because in laboratory testing, we can control size of the material, I mean, your specimen. We can control size, we can control boundary condition, we can control, non-uniformity, we can control even the, stress path. So that's why we have laboratory testing, because we can control many parameters. Now, sometimes we cannot understand in lab and field because of the lack of, you can say, instrumentation. We cannot put instrument at every point. We cannot quantify certain things at every point. So we go for numerical. So in numerical, basically, we control everything almost. We can control boundary, we can control material, we can control, we can get information from any point in the soil in numerical modeling. When we talk about the domain. So in numerical modeling, we control everything almost. But the problem in numerical modeling is we have to get information, the calibration part from either lab or field. Okay. So there's a linkage between these three. So the reason I'm mentioning this, because when we write a manuscript, we have to be very careful on one point, that we should not oversell your method. If you have only adapted lab, then you need to be very careful when you write in methods, when you describe your lab, that this laboratory method is based on, this particular aspect in the field. And these are the limitations. You have to be very clear. Because when you try to oversell your methodology, many times the reviewers will attack your paper there. They will write to attack because they will highlight your limitations of your method. Okay. And then they will say that your results are cannot be generalized because you only use lab and you have all these limitations in your lab and assumptions. And that's why we cannot do this. Or if you highlight only field, again, they will come up with problems that, the interpretation of results is not good, So that's why you need to understand the limitations of each method. Remember, that's why I show you this slide, that none of these methods are perfect. Okay. So when you write your method, your lab or field or numerical, please remember, you need to understand your limitations also at the same time. So don't oversell your methodology, but at the same time, you need to justify. Suppose most of the time you're working in the lab, so you need to justify your laboratory setup using your field understanding. Okay? So what are the assumptions that you have made when you design your laboratory setup based on the field? Okay? So those limitations are very important, or assumptions. So in material methods, we usually define the material first. Okay? Then we go with methods. Suppose if you're working on only lab, you define your experimental setup, test procedure, as usual. Okay. Now, if the apparatus is not new, it's well known, like compressive strength apparatus, then you don't need to describe it. Okay, it's well known, right? But if your apparatus or the experimental setup is new, your boundary conditions are new, then you need to describe it and also justify. This word I want to mention is justify is very important here. Actually, reviewers is looking for justification in your methods always. Why? If you're using this experimental setup, why you have used it? If you're using, suppose even your dimensions of your setup, why? Okay. Or you have used only one type of soil, why? Okay. So in material methods, reviewers are looking for justification. Okay. In introduction, they're looking for novelty. Okay. As I told you, in material method, they are really looking for justification. So anytime, whatever testing you have done, how many tests you have done, you need to have proper justification. Okay. This details of the test range, how many tests you have done, what are the purpose of those tests. Okay, everything you need to mention it. Then test procedure. Now, if your test procedure is not new, you need to justify your procedure. You can justify either using literature, or like, for example, if I say I have, applied ponding on the soil, ponding means water, up to suppose 5 mm. Okay. Now I need to justify this. So I can say that this 5 mm is referred to, flooding or the ponding level, which was measured in the field, okay, or based on the certain rainfall. Okay. You can justify in this way. So remember, in your test procedure, if it's not new, you need to justify every step carefully. Otherwise, reviewer will ask you these questions. Now, if you justify yourself before you submit manuscript, it also gives an impression to reviewer that you are very careful researchers. Okay. It also gives a good impression to reviewer about your research. Okay. But if you don't justify, then reviewer think that you are just maybe blindly doing this kind of test, but you don't know why you are doing it. Okay. So that's why justification becomes very important. Why you follow these steps? Why you use this particular stress? Why you use this stress path? Everything you need to justify. Now, just to give you idea, when we describe material methods, we do have to mention about materials. A good photograph is very important. Okay, when you talk about fibers, when you talk about certain material, in good photograph means a clear photograph with white background almost, with contrasting background, and also a scale. It's very important. I have put a scale here, and this is the picture, right? So as an engineer, we like to see scale. Okay? But if you order, sometimes from Taba or online, in India, you use Amazon, or you will see that sometimes they don't mention the scale on the photo. Okay? Even in the airplane, I remember, Indigo or somewhere, you try to order a Maggie or a noodles, in the photo, it looks very big. But when you order it, it will come very small. You know why? Because they don't mention the scale in the picture. But for engineering point of view, the scale is very important, because for us, the changes in our dimensions of your particles of soil, not only soil, but also fibers or other material, will affect your results a lot. Even the shape will affect. So that's why scale is very important in engineering. Okay. So when you describe the results, please do mention, again, think from novelty point of view. You have to compare your material. If you're using some new material, try to compare with literature. And also it will help to understand your own results better. And also, when we talk about SEM image, I think many of you might have seen it already or using it in your research. Please also mention magnification scale. And also, you have a scale here and also magnification. Two things are very important in SEM because we use it quite often in our geoenvironmental engineering. So try to mention magnification and scale at the same time. Suppose if you are not able to measure some properties of material because of lack of instrumentation, lack of funding, lack of anything, try to take those values from literature. Okay, at least the range. You can say that you have not conducted your basic property test here, but at least you got some ideas from literature. What's the different surface area per volume will look like for certain biochar. So you can use literature also to justify or to infer some of those values which you cannot do it in your lab sometimes. Or if it is too late, sometimes it's like you submitted the work already to a journal, and maybe you did this work 2 years before, and the journal asks you, can you list out these properties of your material? And you don't have it, right? But you can always use literature review for that. Okay, at least bare minimum you can do this. And coming to experimental setup, now this is very important photograph of experimental setup. How to take a good picture is very important. Now, in your article, it's not just the writing matters. Actually, the first impression is given by abstract and also figures. Two things are very important, abstract and figures. First impression, why I say it, because editor will look in your figures first, what you have drawn. Okay, if your figures are very scientific, very professional, they will have more trust or good impression on your research. They will like to see abstract. If your abstract is also good, then they will like to see your introduction, or they will like to send you a paper for review. But if your figures are not new or not professional, and your abstract is not professional, then most likely they will not send you a paper for review. So this is how we normally take a photograph. You can see your clear background, very clear labeling, with boundary conditions, everything should be mentioned. Now, this is the experimental setup of mini disk interferometer. Now, it's not a very common test we do in geotechnical engineering. So this time when we submitted this work in Geotechnical Engineering Journal, they ask us to describe it carefully and also justify it. Okay, remember, if your apparatus is not new, you need to justify it. How you will justify? You can use previous studies if they have used this apparatus to give confidence that that this apparatus has been used before and have reasonable, output. And then properly label figure. Now, this is very important point. Any experiment that you do has to be linked to theory, fundamental theory. You cannot do experiment without linking to theory, okay? So experiment and theory should come together. And every experiment that you do in the lab, remember, it have limitations with respect to field. and also assumptions. So every test that you're doing in the lab is not completely disconnected from the field. It have a connection. So this connection means you have simplified what you want to found in the field, you have simplified it, and you have made that small apparatus in a lab. And what you have simplified, you need to list out those assumptions and also limitations. This is a very important point. So remember, when you write any manuscript in future for your method, for your experiment, please think about limitations and assumptions first. Okay, and highlight it yourself, because if you highlight yourself, you are also showing your honesty. You are being honest, okay, about your own research. This is very important. Don't oversell your research also. Okay. Now, this is another way. If you have a very little complex experiment, you involve different instruments. You have a 1D pot like this. So we call it illustration or schematic diagram, because sometimes you cannot show all the instruments in actual photograph. So you need to use illustration or drawing. So you can use plan view. If you have some instrument which is you have obtained from chemistry or biology, then please highlight it. It's very important for geotechnical engineering people, because they will learn something new from chemistry and biology, right? Similarly, if we are submitting paper to environment or chemistry or biology journal, then you need to also highlight more carefully about your instruments or your terminology that you are using in geotechnical engineering, okay? So please highlight all these instruments which you are using from other disciplines carefully, okay, in a picture. So you can also draw something like this, which includes some real photographs and some illustration. We call it self-explainable system. So if I show you this photograph, you will get an idea what kind of test has been done in the paper, right? You will get a very good idea. Like this picture will give you idea what experiment have been done, right, in the paper. Even give you idea there are two types of vegetation. There's even a bare soil, even the parameters what have been measured, even the boundary conditions are clear, the materials are clear, instrumentation is clear, parameters are clear. This is very good example. Okay, this is a very good example. You can even take a screenshot of this, because this will give you very clear idea of the whole experimental approach you have adopted in the paper, even the work you have done in the paper, even something new. So we try to highlight these biological parameters, two biological parameters, which are very new in geotechnical engineering. So we try to highlight it in the experimental picture also. So you can use your experimental photograph to highlight your own novelty and your rigorous approach. If you are not able to draw a good photograph like this, actually you are losing this kind of space to showcase your good research. So it's not just good experiments are important, good simulations or hard work, but it's also hard work in writing. It's also important at the same time. Okay, remember, if you're not doing this particular hard work in writing, no matter how much good research you have done, it won't be published. Very difficult to publish. Okay. And also, this is example of test plan. Test plan means how many tests you have done. Like if I have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if you have done this kind of test, what parameters you have considered, what parameters you have varied in different tests. So you need to highlight it clearly. Okay. Number of tests, type of test, table showing test series is good. You can have parameters varying in the test, justify the range of parameters, particular standard. Now this word, I am saying justification. Okay. I will remove all other words. Now for material and methods, remember this word is very important. We call it justification. Okay. Justification is very important. Okay. So you can say boundary conditions written, tree characteristic written, and this test. So you give a very clear table like this. Okay, so that looking at the table and looking at this kind of experimental figure, reviewer will get an idea what you have done in your entire paper. You make life of reviewer easy. When you do that, the reviewer will be more happy or will have more trust in your result. Okay, the impression will be good. So it's also about impression. Okay. Now, when you describe your test procedure, I will highlight important points. Okay. I told you that in test procedure, you need to justify, right, why you are doing this, right? Now, read these lines. They are describing how the compaction was done of a soil in a mold, in a particular like box, how the compaction was done, right? Now, this is assumption. This point is assumption, is assumed to be uniform. Then even it is mentioned about different densities. Okay, the soil samples were compacted. Okay, you see, you try to read this line. The dimensions of the mold were chosen to mitigate any interaction between three-dimensional front and the mold boundary, thus preventing preferential flow along the boundary. You can see here, even the dimensions of mold has to be justified. Okay, mold means this one. Okay, this one. I'm talking about this experiment. This instrument, this apparatus or experiment is not common in geotechnical engineering. So we have to justify everything when we try to submit an article. Why these kind of dimensions were chosen. So when you read any other paper, please try to learn from other papers also, how they have justified their own research, how they have justified their own experimental setup, how they have justified their own boundary conditions in their research. So you need to use this for your own research. Yeah. So don't do experiment or design experiment or do the test immediately. Okay, if you do it very fastly, you may make mistakes in boundary conditions and other things, and your results will not be useful. Okay. So even you see here, fiber percentage was restricted to avoid formation of pockets having low density. So even you can look at this one. So we have justified every small detail in it. Okay. So remember, when you write your test procedure or describe your experimental setup, please justify. If you justify in the beginning, reviewer will trust you more. If you justify not in the beginning, then reviewer will question you more and they may think that you are not careful researcher. And also, some of you might be doing field testing. Again, it's very important. When you do any field testing, you need to highlight certain points. One is, suppose if you're doing testing in China, you need to highlight, map of China. Then suppose this testing actually is very close to Shanghai. This is Suzhou already. You can see here Suzhou. This is Shanghai. So if suppose this testing were done in two places, you first give a map of China, a bigger map. Then you give a map of your region. Like here, they have given of their province or state. In India, suppose if you are in Indore, you can give map of India, then you can give map of Madhya Pradesh, okay, state, India, and then you can highlight Indore if you are doing some testing in the field in Indore, okay. Now, why this is important is because for civil engineering, or I would say even in geo-environmental engineering, climate matters. Climate matters. Groundwater table matters, okay, boundary condition matter, location, climate, and scale. When we do any field test, these three things are important, okay. Now, imagine somebody is reading your paper in US or UK, and you're doing research in India or China. Then a person who is reading in UK, he or she can understand in which part of the country you have done research, in which city, and also what's the climate look like. Because climate affect our results in geo-environmental engineering, do affect our results, no matter, because we all know soil is affected from environment, right? Constantly. So the climate becomes very important for them. So, and also it gives a very good idea for readers all over the world that your testing or monitoring of in the field occurs in which part of your country and what the climate looks like. It's very important because then they can relate their results with your results. Okay, so that's why this basic information becomes very important. So this is very good way of highlighting. You give a map of your country, map of one region, then you can give these two maps, one highlighting either you can give, for if you have two sites, you can give for two sites. If you have more sites, you can give more sites. Okay, and this is a map which we did in Guwahati in India. During my tenure there. So this is a map of India. We highlighted, this is Assam province, and this is a campus of IT. You can see this is a river, Brahmaputra River. It's a famous river which flows along IT, and also it comes from China. Yeah. So image capturing is very important. High resolution camera, clear background, very important. I've seen many articles published, even in Canadian Geotechnical Journal. Recently I saw, the image capture was not good. There was a lot of messy background. So please be careful. Your background should be clear when you take a photograph. Place a contrasting cover behind your experiment, white or blue. An image must be taken with scale. Okay. For example, this one. This is very good example of a small scale setup. You can also take a large scale setup, but image can be clear like this. Scale dimensions, labeling, clear background, resolution, direction of arrows. Now, your arrow direction should be towards the object, not towards the label. I have seen many people, okay, like this. This is wrong. Your direction of arrow, if you look at this, direction of arrow should be towards object, not towards the label. Okay. Font size, plain and simple. Don't try to do creative writing or something in the figure. Should be look very professional and clean. Okay. Or if you have more complex experimental setup, you have many instruments, you can try to show them using schematic diagram. Okay. Schematic means you can see here, I have put camera and rainfall using a kind of cartoon, right? This is also a cartoon, right? This is real. 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 So this one is kind of illustration, and it shows my boundary condition and also parameters what I measure, right? Scale dimensions, labeling, clear background, resolution, direction of arrows, consistency. All these things should be carefully noted down, okay, when you draw a figure. Also, if you want to be more scientific in your experiment in the field or lab, you can also give actual field setup. You can also give conceptual diagram. Conceptual means you can try to highlight points where you expect deformation or changes in water content or changes in pressure that can occur. Okay, and then this can help to justify your instrumentation. Okay, so one is schematic, conceptual, and actual field setup. Conceptual means you try to justify why you have instrumentation at these points, because you expect some, because from theoretical point of view, you expect there's some changes that can occur in this particular depth of the soil or in these particular regions along the soil or embankment. And if you have this conceptual idea in your mind, you can say that I use this conceptual idea in my mind. You draw this conceptual idea, and then you can draw it in the same figure where you put instrumentation. So three things can come together. This is also one good example, okay, of showing your field setup. Okay, by showing this, you are trying to review that. Look, all these instruments that you have used, extensiometer, tension wire, you have used it because you have a conceptual idea in your mind about deformation. Okay. When you describe any figure, describe the figure first, then dimensions, then again, you need to justify why. Okay. Justify the conditions of testing. This is the most important thing. I'm sure you can describe the figure yourself, but justification becomes very important. Yeah. So I'm not going into details of each and every small part, but I highlighted the main point. It's a justification, like why this kind of dimensions, why this kind of boundary conditions you need to justify while you write your manuscript. So I'm covering in this lecture most important points only. I'm not covering every small detail, but most important point that we have to consider while writing our manuscript. Coming to the last point, results and discussion. So most of the journals, they have two sections, results and discussion combined. Okay, but some journals you will see that they will say you describe results separate and discussion separate. But the logic is same. The logic means results means we generally say factual observation from graphs. So whatever graphs we draw, we write. Discussion means you try to explain those results. Explain means you can either use physics, or theory to explain the results, or you can use literature review, say some evidence in literature review. Somebody have, done some experiment, they also find this, you can explain. Now, discussion purpose is explain the result, also highlight your studies, because when you compare your results with previous results, it can give idea whether your results are new or not. And your results are reasonable. This is very important. Yeah. Especially for all those researchers who are working in experiments and in the lab or in the field, even in numerical modeling. If I ask you a question, how do you know your results are meaningful or reasonable? How do you know your measurements are correct? If I ask you this question, how do you know your measurements are correct? Or how do you know your results are meaningful or reasonable? For that point, you must have some theory in your mind, some very simple calculation. Like if I say F equal to m mass into acceleration, right? This is also simple. Or we say F equal to kx. K is your stiffness, x is your displacement, right? Force equal to k times x. So you can calculate stiffness using this, right? So you should have some theory in your mind. And also literature review. You need to check what kind of values people measure for that particular parameter in literature, and what do you expect. Okay, so some idea you should have in your mind from literature review and also theory. So this point is very important when I say results are reasonable, because how do you know your measurements are correct? How do you know your numerical simulations are reasonable? So again, justification comes. Yeah, so you can see in the manuscript, we are actually fighting with our own research, trying to justify, trying to, first of all, we have to prove our research is novel. Second, we have to justify our method is correct, our results are reasonable. Okay, so these three things are very important. So results is factual observation, which I believe many of us can do, but discussion is somewhere you need to really, really put more attention to. Try to use theory to explain results. Okay, like we use small column theory to explain our directional results. Now, discussion of results is important because we want to highlight novelty. Cross-reference means compare with other studies. Explain if there is similar or if there is difference with other results, it's even better. If there is similarity with other results, it's good, but not very good. But if there is difference, then it's very good. It means there is something new you can point out. Okay, so remember, difference with other studies is sometimes much better than similarity. If you in your research every time you say this is similar, this is similar, this is similar, it means your results are all right. It's not something new. If you say every time it's similar, just think about it. So it means when you highlight difference, it's much better, and then you can explain your difference. Yeah. For example, the finding is in contrast to that observed is good, but you need to explain also why. So there could be many reasons, but you need to give some hypothesis. Okay, so suppose you have a figure like this for your results. Okay, I mean, you don't need to pay attention to the technical part of the figure. I will explain you. The first is you introduce your figure first, the first line. And then you describe your figure, your results. Very simple description. And then you need to explain the trend and the magnitude. Okay, so factual description of your result, linear, non-linear decrease, scientific explanation like why it has happened. Then you can also use theory, existing laws to explain. If you cannot use it, then you try to find previous research or literature to justify it, to explain why it. If you cannot, then you can only give hypothesis. But don't explain hypothesis too much. Okay, hypothesis should not be more than 1 or 2 lines. Hypothesis means something which you don't have evidence for. Okay, this is very important to claim novelty. So these 6 points, please remember that it's important to explain your result. Okay. Now, I've given some examples. For example, like figure 7, we introduce the figure, and then we say this may be attributed to this. Now, you should pay attention to this word maybe. Why I written maybe? Because I'm not sure about it. Okay, so when you are not sure about the explanation or the reason, then you can use these words maybe, might be, or this is likely. But if you're very sure about the explanation, then you can use this is due to. Okay, very clearly this is due to. But if you're not sure, then you can say this may be. Okay, so this is explanation, but you don't have very strong evidence for this. So hypothesis in explanation should not be too long. Okay. If your evidence is weak, as I said, you can use maybe, might be. You can use this word maybe, might be, is probably due to. If your evidence is strong, you can use this is likely or this is due to. Okay. For example, here also, when you want to explain your result, if your evidence is not strong, go for maybe. If your evidence is very weak, then you use might. Might means it's much weaker than may even. Okay. You see, might further decrease, might disturb. So these words are in English, but it matters. It matters because people who are reading your manuscript or reviewing, they may be coming from native countries, they're English. So they're looking at your words very carefully. Okay. So think about your evidence. We cannot say our research is complete always. It will never be complete. We always will lack some evidence. So if your evidence of your result is not strong, then try to use literature, more literature or indirect evidence, I would say, to justify your result. Okay, it's very important that we justify our results, either using our own evidence or we use from literature or theory. Like suppose if you have some hypothetical mechanism in your mind that it might have happened because of this, you can also draw an illustration for your hypothetical idea. Okay, like maybe it's because of this, it might have happened. So in our research, we think it may be due to preferential flow that infiltration rates were observed. So we draw this mechanism to show them. Okay, to explain the result. So this is purely to explain the result. Okay, so hypothetical mechanism can be also true. It's not like you have complete evidence of it, but you have your own understanding. You can display this understanding using a figure. Now, using figure, this mechanism looks more better than if I write in text everything, right? So figure make it more clear. So you can use this kind of illustrations to explain your thinking or your idea about certain mechanism in your own research, right? So this is very good example of displaying or depicting your hypothetical understanding of mechanism. Or now this is very good example of a result, I would say. You see, usually you have a results here and you have an illustration of mechanism here together. So results and mechanism can be together. Okay, you don't need to present this, but if you write it in text, it becomes difficult to understand. So this is one way of understanding results and mechanism together. So mechanism for possible explanation of result, explain the trend, bring out new insights for future theoretical development. So this is basically mechanism. Now this is result. Left side is the result. This cartoon about grass and soil is mechanism. Okay, so you can use similar method. Okay, you can also use some reference lines, we call it. So if I ask you, how do you know your measurements are correct or reasonable? We can compare with literature always, or we can use reference lines from literature to justify that our measurements are reasonable. Okay, so first thing is justification of measured data, explain the variability in measured data, bring out limitations from theory, and also new insight for future development. So you can, your results figure should not be only one line or two lines. It's too simple. You should have multiple lines in it. One is reference lines. You can also add mechanism part in it, like here. Then your figure becomes self-explainable. Even your results become self-explainable. You don't need to refer to text always to explain your result. You can use the figure to explain your result. It's similar to the experiment, right? It's similar to the experimental picture which I showed before. Okay. So in summary, quality of figures is very important in improving the readability of manuscript. Description should be more factual. Explanation should be provided to justify testing conditions and observe data. Okay. It's always beneficial to compare your results with literature to justify experimental data and bring out novelty. Cross-reference with literature is very important, as I told you, novelty, and also to understand your measurements are correct or not. Okay. And there's something which I will highlight in the end. Okay. Okay. So I'm not going through all the important points I will cover here. So novelty point comes in objectives, very important. And introduction and results, you need to highlight your difference with literature. Conclusion, and highlight limitations of previous study in introduction. Rigor part comes in methodology and justification. Remember, in methodology, there's a lot of focus on justification. Then if you have done any replicates, statistical analysis, it's even better because it means you have put more effort in justifying your data, right? Measurements, again, if you have given details about accuracy, calibration, limitations, and link to theory. Remember, link to theory is very important. You cannot just present experiment, but there is no theoretical background in it. So every experiment should have a theory which leads to design of that experiment. Okay. Experimental simulation details, okay, boundary conditions, material properties. Again, link to theory and just remember, even though you are doing experiment, you should have linkage when you're writing your manuscript. You should be linking it to theory and also justifying it. Okay, justification is very important for in your methodology specifically, and also your results. When I talk about connect, now this is also one part where we sometimes miss out when we write a very long manuscript. Your literature review should be relevant. Your connection with current study and highlight limitation. Now, when you're writing conclusions, you should write conclusion, not results. Conclusions are insights from your results. And there should be connection between your objectives and conclusion. You need, when you write your conclusion, you need to rethink again whether your objectives you have written is the way you have written objective makes sense or not, or you need to refine it further. Now, this is further very important. Suppose you have 10 figures in your paper. And if your figure 8 or 9 is not having any linkage with figure 2, 3, or 1, it means your first few figures are not meaningful. You need to make it more meaningful so that you can link it to the final figure, your results figure. So, and also in terms of literature in introduction, suppose you mention a lot of literature review in introduction, but you never use those literature review for discussion of your result. Then it means either your results are not explained well or compared with literature, or your literature in introduction is not relevant. So you need to remember this point that your paper is well connected from introduction to the end. And the idea is to display the novelty and rigor in your research. That's the main to focus. And based on these two criteria, we have to describe our manuscript accordingly. And honesty is very important, because if you oversell your methodology, especially because I told you methodology have many limitations, field, lab, or numerical, you will be given many questions to justify in the revision, or they will reject your paper. Okay, so that's what I want to highlight in the end. Yeah, so sorry for taking long time, but because I think it's a very long topic to discuss, I mean, about writing. I try to highlight most key points in this talk. And if you have any doubts or something to discuss, we can discuss. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Professor Ankit Garg, for a wonderful lecture again. I'm sure that all the participants have gathered the scientific knowledge from you. And of course, this is a big topic and which requires nearly maybe I would feel more than 5 lectures. And in detail, every aspect you have covered in detail for this scientific writing. We're really grateful and thankful to you for giving such a wonderful lecture. So there are certain questions asked by the participants here. I think these participants cannot unmute themselves. So I request them to post in the chat box if they have any questions. Professor Ankit Garg, can I read the questions, or are you able to see in the chat box?
I can see, let me see in the chat box.
Otherwise, I can read it out for you.
Okay. So
there are
write,
some
okay.
there are some applause for you from excellent presentation by Dr. Ankit. Lead ideas and tips are extremely useful. The lecture is crisp and to the point. It was given by the co-chair, Professor Satish Kumar Sharma.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I can read the question. So
All
the
right.
first is about I think Praveen BS mentioned about the sentences extend beyond 3 to 4 lines. See, ideally, I mean, the main thing is when we write any sentence, grammatically it should be correct, right? And also it should be meaningful. That's the main idea. Since from a perspective that we are not native people, like our English is not the first language, especially, I mean, most of the countries, right, except UK. We should try to, I mean, from my understanding, we should try to, for our case, I try to limit within 2 lines, maximum 3 lines, and try to break, if any sentence is very long, maybe more than 3 or 4 lines, I will try to break it into 2 sentences, you know, maybe 2 lines each. But I will not try to write sentence which is 4 or 5 lines longer. Usually it's written, I mean, it has to be grammatically correct. That's the main thing. Okay. But because we are not native speaker, my own thinking is that we should try to make it more simple and short. Okay, that's the main thing. I mean, the sentence meaning should be clear and grammatically correct. That's it. So if we write shorter and simple sentence, it will be more easy for us to understand for others. Yeah, that's what. And the next question is, would like to understand software which can be used for constructing new search type. I mean, personally, I simply create many of these diagrams on Microsoft PowerPoint. I mean, but there are many softwares available which can be also used to create more, which can be used for creating better visualization purpose. You can say some kind of diagrams. But there is no such, I mean, I'm not aware clearly that what kind of softwares can be used for particular research. But I think usually we use Microsoft Word or PowerPoint can create more clear. I think for our geotechnical engineering, it's good enough, I would say. Yeah. Anything? Okay.
Yeah, we do have another question from yeah, Swagata Bishoy. Paper writing.
Yeah, when we will write in present tense, okay, that's a good question. So actually, when we are writing paper, it means, especially when we are describing methodology, okay, like our experiment, we normally write in past tense because our research have already been done, right? So we will say, in this study, the soil, silty sand soil was used, right? We will say was used because we already finished the research. But when we are describing figures, then we use present tense when we are describing figures. Like figure 1 shows the variation between, suppose, stress and strain. So we use present tense. In that, when we are describing figures, we use present tense. But when we are describing especially our methodology, we use past tense always. Okay, because our research have already been done. Okay. So, but in description of figures, we normally use present tense and we describe figures in. So we need to think why we use past tense. We use present tense most of the time, but why we use past tense in certain cases is because that we are describing research which is already being done. Okay. It's because we are writing paper, it means we already finished the research. So that's why we use past tense for describing mainly, you can say, methodology, everything. But when you're describing the experimental setup in the figure, again, you're using, we can use, we will introduce figure in the present tense, but when we are describing that the material was used, we will say past tense, or we will say the boundary conditions. We can say the boundary conditions of this was considered. We can say is considered. Both are okay in this case because we are describing figure in the present tense. But my suggestion is we should use past tense in the methodology part because we have finished the research already. But when we are describing the results, we can describe it in present tense because we are describing the figure. That's why it's in the present. Yeah. And also there's one more reason why we use present tense sometimes is because imagine if somebody is reading your paper or reading an article, that person is reading in the present tense, right? In the present, this paper. So this figure 1, I would say figure 1 depicts this. As per the figure, the stress increase with time, okay, is found to increase with time. So we say is, not was, okay? Because in the present tense, when we are reading, or somebody is reading, he's still reading in the present. So we will use is when we are describing the results also. Yeah. Then could you also suggest any specific reading material to further work on ourselves? I think there are some good papers, published papers, which can be referred to learn how to write paper. Yeah. I mean, especially in our own field, I think in geotechnical engineering, there are some reputed journals like Geotechnique, Canadian Geotech Journal. Some of the papers published there are very nicely written. We can refer to those articles to learn how to write. Especially, I think we can refer to some of the articles from Imperial College, Oxford University, Cambridge, some of the famous known scholars in geotechnical engineering. I think if you read those articles, we can read the way those articles have been written. Specifically, I think in the year maybe 2010 or 2000 or before. Yeah, I mean, I will usually use that articles also to learn how to write it or describe it. Yeah. I think the similar question, writing should be in active or passive voice, is a similar question. As I said, for experiment that has been done already, we describe it in the past, but for describing figures and describing results, we can use present. But to describe something which is already done, we use past. Yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah, from the
Thank
chat
you,
box.
thank you, Professor Ankit
Yeah.
Garg, for clarifying all the participants' queries. And with this, I would like to briefly summarize your topic and then give a vote of thanks. So, for all the participants and benefit, So Professor Ankit Garg has delivered his wonderful lecture again on scientific writing, morely focused on the abstract, which is very essential and key part of this manuscript. And various selling points he has mentioned, especially methodology and results and the important main objectives, etc. And the part of abstract, he has included main background, objective, material, methods, key results, and conclusions. He has briefly explained each and every aspects of their importance and significance. And coming to the introduction part, he has emphasized several parameters like significance, literature review, limitations, hypotheses, and motivation and objectives. And the sequence that he is preferred and suggested for the participant is a bottom to top approach, which is more meaningful in adapting the scientific writing. And he also emphasized significantly on the material properties. For example, when the material properties are not available, how to reference them using the literature or the past studies. And also the more emphasis on providing the limitation and hypothesis, which one he explained from his own research articles. It is important that ethics has to be followed in every manuscript, mentioning their limitations and hypotheses, whether it is expected to experiment, field, or simulation. One must mention their limitations, not oversizing their or over selling their research. So apart from that, he has very well explained through the realistic examples by taking maps, photographs, and schematic representations, which can be explained through various mechanisms like schematic, conceptual, and actual field setup. So those are one of the major key points or the key matters which are really important for the scientific writing. And finally, he has also pointed out on the referencing styles and how to make a cross referencing, etc. So this is one of the major topic we believe, and he has very clearly and crisp he has mentioned as like previous keynote lecture. And I would like to thank Professor Nilima Satyam, chairperson of IGS Indore chapter, for initiating such a very wonderful GeoHorizon lectures and encouraging the students. And also I'd like to thank Professor Satish Sharma, co-chair, and honorary secretary, Dr. Amit Sharma, for joining the session and making it more meaningful. And thank you, Professor Ankit Garg, and big thanks to you. Despite of your busy schedule, you have in short notice you have showed up. And we are really thankful. And if participants have any further queries, you can always reach out to Professor Ankit Garg going through his home page and at his university website. And last words from the Ankit Garg. Thank you, and over to you, and we'll finish it up with your word.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Ramu. I think it's, I mean, you have summarized it very well, I would say. And I'm very delighted to share this lecture, especially for young scholars who are going to, I mean, who are maybe still doing their PhD or master degree. I think I just want to tell them that learning is possible everywhere. I mean, don't limit yourself to one field or one department or one topic. The more we are interdisciplinary these days, the more you will learn a lot. So I mean, it's not just within one department, yeah, but I think these days it's a lot of, especially I mean the university where I'm working. Yeah.
Thank you, Ankit Garg, and see you again in future lectures.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you.